Hello, everybody. I'm Susanna DeBaca, the president of Business Publications Corporation and the editor of, or the publisher of DSM Magazine. And I want to welcome you to our Lifting the Veil series called Life Transformed. This is the fourth event in our series, and this panel today will be focused on teens at risk. So some of you may be wondering, what is Lifting the Veil? Last year, we launched a Lifting the Veil mental health series to accompany the magazine we've done for years. And we called this series Life Interrupted because our life was very much interrupted. And that series was so well received that we brought it back again this year, now to focus on the mental health effects of the multiple disruptions of the last year and a half, and specifically what you can do to support yourself or others. Today, we're going to be focusing on teens. As you're going to hear from some experts, teens have been facing so much change, so much challenge, that it is compounding an already difficult time of life for them. Anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and suicide are now at epidemic proportions nationally and in Iowa. And these are very, very serious, grave issues for teens, for families, for schools, and frankly, for all of Iowa. So that's what we're going to explore today, but we will have some hopeful advice and plenty of resources as well. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. If for some reason we lose power or internet, which has happened in the past, just log right back on. If your line drops off, log right back on. If you want to post on social media, which we'd love for you to do, please use the hashtag DSM LTV Teens at Risk. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat. If you want to chat to the entire audience, please make sure that your settings will enable you to do that. Otherwise, you might be chatting only to the guest experts, which is fine as well. But let's start by chatting a question that you have for today, just to get the interaction going. If you can type into the chat, what is something that you are particularly concerned about regarding teens' mental health? So let's see what comes in. While you are chatting, I want to thank a couple of groups. First of all, of course, thank you to the DSM team who worked tirelessly to create and execute this series, from the concepts to stories to finding the experts, designing the slides, working with sponsors, and promoting the program. It really takes a village. So thank you very much to the DSM team and to our entire BPC staff who make programs like this possible. You guys are a fabulous team, and I'm privileged every day to get to work with folks who care so much about our community. The DSM team does an outstanding job on many things, including their work on Lifting the Veil. In addition to this series, they create an annual Lifting the Veil publication. If you haven't seen last year's publication, you can see the online version at the address listed here. Or you can order a hard copy by calling 515-288-4582. We'll have a new issue coming up in November, and we'll tell you about that a little bit later. I also want to thank our sponsors who made this program possible. Thank you so much to our supporting sponsor, Delta Dental, our supporting sponsor, Clive Behavioral Health, our sustaining sponsor, Employee and Family Resources, IMT Insurance, and to NCMEC for hosting our mental health moment. They are celebrating their 75th anniversary this year, so I want to say congratulations to NCMEC. They are a health-related company that supports our community in so many different ways, and all aspects of health are at the forefront of them, as you're going to see in this short video. So let's hear from NCMEC for this mental health moment.
Building a better community doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. It takes a team, and it takes time. That's why for 75 years, we at NCMIC have been here working for you and with you. But this anniversary, we're not just looking back, we're focusing on the future, on building Iowa, on the better days ahead, and on how together we can all start taking the path forward.
So looking at the chat to see what were the things that were concerning you about mental health, really, really interesting. Everything from technology to violence in schools, really, really interesting. So obviously we've got a great program, and hopefully we'll address a lot of the things that you guys chatted. So let's talk about how the program is going to work today. First of all, we actually have a very special guest and announcement. Then I'm going to introduce our guest experts, and then we'll have several questions. I'll share an audience question via video. Our guest experts will answer that question. We'll do another audience question, and so on. Then we'll have some resources that we want to show you and a wrap up, and we'll get you on with your day. So that is the plan. So I just mentioned that we have a special announcement. We have some very exciting news to share with you. One of our speakers today is Andrew Allen, who is the CEO of Youth and Shelter Services, or YSS, which is a 45-year-old youth development agency with more than 300 employees, serving more than 20,000 youth across Iowa each year. About a month ago, YSS announced that they had received an unprecedented $10 million grant to build a youth recovery campus here in central Iowa. But not very many details were released at that time, and we are going to be sharing some new information with you here today at this event. Andrew's going to share a video, and then we'll hear a little bit more about this transformational project before we get started with the program. So let's see the YSS video.
For more than 45 years, YSS has been creating hope and opportunity, operating programs from old houses in a residential neighborhood. But given the increased need across the state, it's no longer the right tool for the job. More than 7,000 kids need treatment every year in Iowa and don't get it. Now there's hope. Treatment works and recovery is possible.
I'm most grateful to YSS for really showing up and being the program there for kids that are struggling.
We're creating a best-in-class program alongside best-in-class facilities on a best-in-class site.
The thing that gets me the most excited about the new campus is going to be allowing the kids to be out in nature, to be able to really ground themselves, be able to see the trees, see the wind move through the trees, be able to feel the grass in their hands.
The road to recovery starts here.
Andrew, this is so exciting. And full disclosure to the audience, my first job out of high school was working at YSS in their prevention department. And so I kind of get chills at how amazing the work that this organization has done and this monumental project. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about how this youth recovery campus actually came about.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Susanna. Love the connection. You are an employee. I'm an alumnus of the program. So this is my life's work. For years, we've been envisioning both a site and facilities that are commensurate with our programs. And as you mentioned, just over a month ago, it was announced that CICS, the mental health region representing 15 counties across central Iowa, made a landmark commitment and invested $10 million in this project, which really is going to help us go from vision to reality. So Sure want to thank them, want to thank many of the private donors that have given and will continue to give as we push forward on what's going to be likely the biggest project and undertaking in YSS history.
Well, that site looked beautiful with, I could see some fields in the background and a lot of timber. Where is this site?
Yeah, very centrally located. So if you think about the kind of that cultivation corridor between Ames and Des Moines, it's going to be a Cambridge address. Right now, we're in the process of working with Story County to get the conditional use permit approved, and it's the perfect site. We evaluated over a dozen different locations. As we were sharing this vision with people that care about YSS and kids, we had a donor say, I've got the perfect space. We really wanted to be nature-based. We wanted to be centrally located, and it's more than 50 acres of timber and prairie right in the midst of central Iowa that will be able to serve the entire state.
So tell us a little bit about the campus itself. How many youth will this actually serve?
Yeah, it's a great question as well. YSS has been doing this work for 45 years and just kind of growing incrementally. There'll be up to 70 beds at its peak. And so this will triple a 300% increase in our ability to serve as many as 500 kids over the course of a year as those beds turn over. So this is big. There are, as the video mentions, 7,000 kids in the state of Iowa that need treatment every year and don't get it. And as you know about the prevalence of behavioral health needs, 1 in 2 of us will have a mental health need over the course of a lifetime, and 1 in 6 a substance use disorder. And the interesting statistic, and I think we can all relate to it, of those people that become drug addicts and alcoholics, 90% start before their 18th birthday. So the more that we can do to work with kids and families early in their tenure, the more that we can do to create alumni of the program who are sober, productive, contributing members of society.
What's your ETA for actually constructing and opening it?
Yeah, we with approval from the county, we expect to break ground officially, construction in earnest in the spring, and then it's about 18 months. So if you think about the 22-23 school year, we hope to be opened August of 22.
Excellent. Well, final question before we get started then is, this is nature-based. You mentioned that. That just seems amazing, but tell us why this particular project is so transformational, and then how can people find out more or get involved?
Yeah, again, I think the timing is important. A $10 million gift from the mental health region just a few years ago wouldn't have happened for a couple of reasons. Number one, they weren't funding children's services. So we've had a big push to support the children's behavioral health system in the state of Iowa. Number two, I think the pandemic has really exposed the need that exists for kids and families, especially as folks turn to substances to self-medicate from a mental health standpoint. So I think that both of those things, really created the momentum. It will be transformational. The way that people can help, and I always appreciate that question, 3 things: champion, invite, and invest. So be a champion for this project and for this work. You've heard about it now. You're going to hear other people talking about it. Champion the cause. Invite people to come alongside. Susanna knew about this project, asked me to come here today. You likely know people who care a lot about mental health, who care about kids and behavioral health. And we want this to be a signature piece for the state of Iowa, impacting kids across the state. You likely know people that could come alongside and support our work. And the third is invest. And so when I think about invest, it's 3 things always. It's time, talent, and treasure. And so no doubt there'll be lots of opportunities for community input, for folks to invest time, talent, and treasure in this project. And we just encourage people to go to our website. It's easy, yss.org. You can click on the link about the project. You can sign up to get more information and stay up to speed, or reach out that way or to me directly. I'm pretty easy to find, Andrew Allen at YSS, and I'd love to get you connected to this work in this project.
Well, we're thrilled that you could tell us all about this, and how amazing for Iowa that we are getting this kind of funding for treatment facilities, and hopefully it is the start of funding for other potentially similar projects in the state. So wonderful.
I hope so too.
Well, let's go ahead and introduce our expert guest. You've just been hearing from Andrew, but I didn't tell you anything about him. Andrew will be one of our guest experts. He's the president and CEO of YSS, And as he alluded to, he credits YSS with providing services that saved his life in 1995. He later became the charter youth member on the YSS board of directors and then served on the foundation board. Before becoming the CEO, he actually dedicated more than 20 years to serving YSS, but he had a career. For 14 years, he was at Principal Financial Group, where he rose to the position of the president of the Principal Financial Foundation. He was appointed by the governor to the Iowa Children's Behavioral Health System State Board and the state's Juvenile Justice Advisory Council, where he serves as chair. He serves on countless boards and has received numerous honors, including the Fortune 500 Hero Award from Fortune magazine, and he was inducted into the Iowa Volunteer Hall of Fame by the state of Iowa. So we're glad that you are here, Andrew. And next we are joined by Doug Eklund. Doug is the longtime CEO of Cellular Advantage, a company that started in 1993 with a single kiosk in a mall and now includes over 300 stores in 3 states. Doug invests his time supporting the culture that has been built to enrich the quality of life for those in and around the business. He's the author of the 9 a.m. meeting, which teaches individuals great step-by-step strategy to come alive in life, and he teaches business leaders a whole new way of leading. So you might be saying, why is he here today on a mental health panel? Doug has developed a passion about talking about the effects of technology, devices in particular, and really has created a reputation as an expert on that topic. And given the effect of technology on teens' mental health, we are thrilled to have him here. So, hi, Doug, welcome. And our third expert is Dr. Sasha Khosravi. As the Chief Medical Officer of Clive Behavioral Health, Dr. Khosravi oversees clinical operations of the medical staff. He implements safety and quality improvements and evaluates overall quality of services. He's been serving the greater Des Moines community as a psychiatrist and a mental health advocate for nearly 20 years. He's part of the Iowa Psychiatry Society. He was the past chair of its legislative committee. He consults with multiple school districts, and he was awarded a Distinguished Service Award at the 2019 Midwest Regional School Conference. And Dr. Khosravi has been on our Lifting the Veil panels before and was so great that we invited him back. So welcome, Dr. Khosravi. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question. And so we will watch a video clip from audience member.
Teenagers can be tough. As the mom of 2 boys, one in high school and one in college, what advice do you give to parents of teenagers on how to best communicate with them to discuss mental health issues they may be experiencing or their friends may be?
Great question from parent and Bankers Trust executive Emily Abbas. So thank you, Emily, for that question. So again, to summarize, she asks, what advice can you give to parents of teenagers on how to best communicate with them or discuss mental health issues they or their friends might be experiencing? Andrew, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to answer the question. I've got 3 teenagers at home. I was practicing some of this out last night. We'll see how it goes. I'll be listening to other folks for their expertise as well. You know, for me, some of you know, as was just announced, I'm an alumnus of the program. So I've got personal experience. And I think that one of the most important things to do is to build trust, to ensure that you've got an environment where you can have a dialogue and a conversation. And while not everybody is, in recovery like me or has a specific instance of mental health needs or substance use disorder, I think we've all experienced some sort of adversity. So I would say, especially as kids become teenagers, exposing some of that vulnerability such that you can level the playing field and have authentic conversations. I also really feel like it's important to meet kids where they're at. One of the first experiences that I had in my tenure 6 years ago as the CEO at YSS was in a board meeting. I was sharing how important it was for YSS to help kids become successful. And I had a board member who was an expert in youth development reach out to me after the board meeting. And he said, Andrew, yes, well, that's important. It's also important to realize that we're not just helping kids become something, that we're actually valuing them as they are. And so I think that that's an important mindset to have in conversations with our kids. It's become the vision statement for YSS to ensure that we value and empower kids as they are, and is an important piece of, I think, any dialogue.
That's great wisdom for any parent or anyone who has teens in their life, or maybe just for anyone in our lives. Dr. Khosravi, what would you add here?
Thank you for the opportunity today as well. I'm excited to be here. There's a lot of confusion about mental illness, which can cause a lot of anxiety and can certainly strengthen stereotypes and lead to stigma. So fundamentally, as a parent, it's important that you be comfortable with the topic or the subject. When you're not comfortable, when you're approaching a child and they know kids have this amazing intuition of when adults are kind of uncomfortable or struggling. So it's really important to make yourself comfortable with the idea of talking about mental health issues and just knowing a little bit about what you're talking about in order to meet the child, kind of like what Andrew said, kind of where they're at in their life. And the strategy needs to be a little bit different with teenagers specifically. They are not going to respond well to you lecturing to them. So I've tried that with my kids, and generally it's in the ear and out the ear, and they're gone. So it's really important that it's an open dialogue and really becomes more of a give and take type of lecture. Otherwise, you'll lose connection. So that's a really important thing. The other thing is, all of us have bad days. All of us have periods where we are a little bit more anxious. I mean, that's just part of being human. So a lot of things that, sometimes I think we overreact. So it's important to, I'll kind of use a physical kind of complaint. All of us cough at some point or another, and eventually the cough goes away. But let's say we're coughing every day, and then we become short of breath. It's kind of like a depression. It's there. Maybe we have a bad day, but then it becomes 2 days and 3 days, and our shortness of breath might be, it's hard to get out of bed perhaps. So it's kind of easier for some people to look at stuff from a mental health perspective and tying it into a physical perspective, because honestly, it's less abstract. It makes it a little bit easier for them to understand. And make sure you're talking to them when they're feeling safe and comfortable and in a place, like Andrew mentioned, that they can, have that open dialogue. And lastly, I would say, let's make this really a regular, normal part of your conversation. Because if we're only approaching our kids when they're seemingly uncomfortable or struggling, they're going to become a little bit resistant. But if you're checking in, even a couple times a week, it's going to be much less of a sort of a, whoa, why is mom asking me this now kind of attitude. It really helps to just really make that a regular part of your conversation and not when you suspect something. I think that'll help with establishing that dialogue and communication and allowing your children to be much more comfortable with disclosing their mental health needs.
I really like your point about kind of equating it with other regular health issues, that really, I think, helps reduce the stigma. And clearly that's something we on this call are all passionate about. So Doug, you're coming at this from a different angle. Tell us a little bit about how you'd respond to that question.
Well, I think for this question, Suzanne, I mean, I feel I'm right on the same page with Andrew and Dr. Khosravi. I mean, I think at some point our kids don't want to be told what to do anymore. And so pivoting as a parent from being a coach that is really doing that to being a little bit more of a consultant, I think that's so important that we're asking more questions and helping lead them to a decision, maybe as compared to telling them what the decision should be. And a part of that, I think I'm just kind of regurgitating some of this really is though, but not being afraid to be vulnerable and speak from your own experiences. I think that's important too, because when you do get them to crack it open a little bit and you're able to talk to them, if you can say, I call it it's the feel, felt, found, and hey, I completely understand how you feel, because I've felt that way before myself. Many people have felt that way before, and what they've, where they've gone with that is what they've found is that ultimately, a year from now, what you're going through today might not be as big a deal as you think it is right now. But I think just talking to them about how you felt, some of your own experiences, I think that's a better way to get the dialogue started with the teenager. Like these other comments, I've been through the teens twice as well and survived them somehow.
So right now we've got three people, including me, that who've gotten through teenage years. So it's possible, right? That's all good. So the second question that we have is from, again, another parent of teens and Hy-Vee executive, Georgia Van Gundy. So let's hear from her.
We have a lot right now going on in our environment. And how does that impact our teenagers? And how does that stress them out? And what are some of the signs that we should be looking for?
This is a great question. Andrew, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, great to get a question from Georgia, my old boss when I worked at Principal. Right off our website, and I talked to some staff ahead of this event, but really we're looking for changes in behavior, things that you just wouldn't expect or maybe can't explain. Of course, declining performance in school. I think about, my own personal experience, skipping classes or just not being present. I also think a lot about just being secretive in general, not being accountable. One of the things that I think people aren't necessarily always looking for that maybe they should be are missing pills. All of us, I think with the increase in substance use disorder, all of us have pills in medicine cabinets, many of which can be abused. So just keeping track of this. Here's the thing that I was also thinking about. I had a lot of issues as a kid, but I was doing everything I could to hide them from my family. And so one of the measures of success that we have related to a few of the different programs that we run at YSS is a positive adult connection. So we survey kids and we say, do you have a positive adult connection in your life? I'm where I am today because I've had many mentors. I have mentors today, people who care about me and are willing to believe in me more than I believe in myself. So the more that we can surround our kids with positive adults, if they're not comfortable having a conversation with us, maybe they're comfortable having a conversation with you. And here's the thing I also know. I know a lot about the stuff that the friends of my kids are doing. I hear about stuff that parents might not hear about. So to the extent that you've also built relationships with the parents of your kids' friends, and give them permission to share information freely. There's sometimes I hear things and I'm like, it's kind of iffy whether I would share that with a parent or not. But if they've come to me and said, hey, if you hear something, let me know, that really opens a door. So I think that that positive adult influence is pretty important. It also helps to get information that you might not have otherwise.
Susanna, you're on mute.
Oh, I had such a lovely question. So Dr. Khosravi, I was saying from a more provider perspective, what are you looking for?
Well, there's a lot of mental health issues. There's a lot of disorders and diagnoses, and there's certain criteria you have to meet, 5 out of 9 for X number of weeks and so forth. And all that is great and important, and it's validated by research and backed up. But bottom line, and I think Alan alluded to this, is what I'm looking for are patterns, so a persistent pattern. So like I mentioned in the last segment, we all kind of can have a bad day or kind of feel more anxious if we got something big coming up. So, those are okay. What I'm looking for is persistent patterns of those behaviors, of those feelings over time. And most importantly, you can have those symptoms, but if it's not affecting your functioning, then it's technically not considered a disorder. So what I'm also looking for is how is it impacting your functioning? So when I look at a teenager's life, how do they base their self-worth, or how do they look at themselves? A lot of times it's their academics or school performance. A lot of times it's their involvement in the community. A lot of times it's athletics and being involved with teams. And of course, friendships with their peer groups as well as their families. So when I start seeing declines academically, when I see kids drop out of sports, when I see kids who are secretive and isolating and, just kind of being away from their parents and not communicating, those are all pretty big red flags for me. As a psychiatrist, there's really, if I could only pick really two areas that I would screen consistently that would really help me find out if this is a disorder or not, it would be really two symptoms. One is irritability. And I'm talking about excessive irritability, not our teenage irritability that we see with some of our kids. So a lot of kids with anxiety and depression, bipolar, substance use, obviously have a lot of difficulty with managing their emotions, emotional regulation. So a lot of kids get a lot more irritable, a lot of anger, a lot of disruptive behaviors that is out of their norm or baseline. So that's what I look for often, is that where if there's a change or shift with their level of aggression or irritability, that parents are like, we've never seen our child this way before. The other big marker is what I call anhedonia. Anhedonia is basically loss of pleasure, loss of joy in your life. So again, these are kids who stop going outside. They stop doing things for fun. So a lot of times really great athletes, once they hit a depression that has anhedonia, guess what? Even though they're really talented, they stop doing some of those activities. Other things that I really look for are change in sleep cycle. I really have not encountered a disorder in mental health that does not impact your sleep in some form or fashion. So a lot of times I look for inability to fall asleep. With depression, you also have multiple awakenings throughout the night. And in really severe depressions, you have early awakenings where you get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and you have the inability to fall back asleep. And those things are really key markers for me. I could probably go on and on, but for the sake of time, those are fundamentally really the biggest things that I look for when I'm assessing, possible red flags for our teenagers.
Really, really helpful signs to look for, very concrete. So hopefully folks are taking notes. And now I'll ask Doug, and I think this is where your expertise with technology will be really interesting. What are you looking for signs of stress or issues?
Yeah, I think it's a little different, but it's so similar at the same time. Things that I would encourage people to look for, all the smartphone devices now have the ability to track screen time. So, and I would say total screen time amounts are something to take a look at, and I'll get into that a little more specifically. Social media activity, are your kids falling into the comparison trap? Comparing themselves to others. I think educating them that, there's always going to be somebody that's smarter, faster, more talent, just the fact that comparison trap's a big deal. Dr. Khosravi hit on this, and it's so important, is hours of sleep. Is your child always tired? I think that's something that, and again, there's a tip I'll give you here in a minute, just as far as trying to help with that. And then, are you noticing time spent face to face with their friends? Is that decreasing compared to what it used to be? And so, unfortunately, in my world, I rely on selling smartphones, but you can definitely see when the iPhone and smartphones were launched, some of these trend lines in the research, they're really heading the wrong directions. And the research shows that total screen time is related to the percentage of kids who show at least one suicide risk factor. And when you get it up to 5 hours a day, at least one risk factor is present in almost 50% of teens. So it's a 9th grade to 12th grade area. And a suicide risk factor would be someone that's thought about doing it, has actually planned it out, or has made an attempt. And as the screen time goes up, the graph just goes right up as far as the percentage. So that screen time is something to really take a look at. 5 hours is where it gets up to almost half the kids. The research is also showing that social media, it is designed to be as addictive as drugs. The studies, when you're looking at brain activity, show that I mean, there are dopamine hits in the brain, and they're triggered by likes, comments, streaks, you know, whether it be Snapchat streaks or whatnot. The kids they're constantly picking up the device, looking to see, have I got another like, have I got another comment? And the app developers, I mean, it's shown that they will actually hold back likes so that the kid will look and there won't be one. And then they'll release a bunch of them, you know, a few minutes later, you know, just to, I mean, it's kind of like a roulette or a, you know, pulling a slot machine wheel. And so it's a big deal. But the brain is how the brain reacts. It's the same as a substance addiction. Lack of sleep is a huge side effect of all of this. I've got a friend, he's a counselor in the Carlisle School District. He said that most of the kids he's talking to are getting less than 7 hours of sleep, and most of them are, he says, they're up at 1, 2, and even 3 in the morning, and they're on their devices. And so, you know, these kids, they need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. I mean, that helps their body reboot and just kind of, you know, do the body's natural updates that they need. And so those are a couple of things and some tips that I would just share. Number one, and this is one that you will get, I guarantee you'll get pushback on this, but I feel like at some point you might actually get a thank you, and that is no screens in the bedroom. And we've done that with both of our kids from day one, and the phones are in the hallway, they're plugged into charge in the hallway. And our daughter's friends knew that at 10 o'clock at night, they were not going to get a response from her anymore. And that took a lot of pressure off of her as far as getting into that, you know, mess that happens every night. When she'd get up in the morning, there'd be literally hundreds of messages in there that happened post 10 p.m. And she finally came to me and she's like, you know, Dad, it's kind of nice to not be in all the drama. So big pushback at the beginning, a little gratefulness at the end. It was great. Second thing, as far as a tip, this is a fun game you can play as a family, and it's the screen time game. And that's really, you get a baseline of everyone's screen time. So you pull up the phones. How many hours did I have last week on my device? How many times did I pick it up? What were the first apps I looked at? It's all right there for you to see. And then you set a game with the family, who can make their screen time number get smaller each week, and set some prizes and do some games with that. It's kind of fun. And if you can poke fun at yourself, it really works out pretty well. We've had some good times with that. Next thing, as a parent or a mentor, you've got to set a good example. And you know, when you come into the room and this is in your hand and you're having a conversation with somebody, in the back of their mind, they're like, okay, is something on that phone more important than I am? So I think the fact that this just needs to be completely out of the way during family time, during game time, if it's any one-on-one time that you're getting with your kid, the phone just needs to be put away. And that shows them that they are the most important thing that's going on at that time. And then the last thing I feel like is just awareness and teach them about the fact that social media is designed to be addictive. Teach them that these things are, I mean, for a teenager's brain, which isn't fully developed yet, just teach them to be aware of what's going on so that they can understand, and even ask them, you know, how does that app make you feel after you use it? How does that game make you feel after you use it? Just to get, I mean, those are some good non-threatening questions to ask, and just kind of get them talking a little bit about how they're using their stuff. But those would be my, just for time's sake, those would be a few that I'd throw out there.
Terrific suggestions, and we were thrilled to be able to have you as a resource. As I said, it's an entirely new dimension of mental health, and for you as a professional in the field to actually be saying reduce your screen time, that's really that's powerful, that there's appropriate use for devices, and it's not 100% of the time. So let's go to our next question. And this question is from Renee Hardman, who's a local leader, who's the CEO of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So let's listen to what she asks.
Teens of color face unique obstacles. What advice or resources can you share for parents of those who care for teens from underrepresented communities?
So let's start with Dr. Khosravi. Any insights here for Renee?
Well, I appreciate the question. And, you know, honestly, the biggest thing is, and this doesn't necessarily relate to background, ethnicity, or race, is even for anyone really, is your family, your kids especially, will look up to you as a role model. So the biggest thing that you can do to take care of them is to take care of yourself. And that will really help your children's struggles. And if we look at specifically some of the minority populations and underrepresented members, the Black and Latino adults have had an increased rate of illness and death from COVID-19. They've had negative financial impacts, certainly due to job loss, and a disproportionate economic setback, certainly. And there's been, unfortunately, increased rates of domestic violence related to that, which has all led to really poor mental health outcomes for the adults. So really focusing on yourself and getting yourself in a good spot will help your kids. But certainly we've seen a change with our African-American teenagers and Latino teenagers as they've had increased rates of mental illness, and honestly, they're less likely to receive care. And the biggest thing is in the social climate is a lot of times right now, obviously our teenagers are very well aware of the heightened awareness of racial injustice. And this creates a lot of anxiety for a lot of our teenagers. So it's really important to keep that dialogue open with our teenagers, especially about social injustice and racial injustice issues that are fairly prevalent, obviously with George Floyd and kind of the landmark incident there, which has really created a lot of, I think, positive conversations and open dialogue for a lot of families. That's very important for us. And, they've done a study recently, and a fourth of our US high school students are struggling in some capacity with dealing with the pandemic and mental health issues. And sadly, only a third of them feel they actually have the appropriate coping strategies or skills to deal with their stressors. So that's a huge gap there that we need to figure out how best to not only identify them, but once we identify them, how best to give them the tools and strategies to deal with some of their challenges. And as far as specifically, unfortunately, with our some of our minority populations, suicide rates for Black children have increased significantly, and they're actually double the counterpart of white children. So it's definitely having a much stronger impact on our Black population, certainly with that data. That was for a smaller age group, believe it or not necessarily the teenage age group, but nonetheless, I think the patterns will be pretty prevalent throughout different demographics.
Great insights. Now, Andrew, I know at YSS you deal with a lot of kids from underrepresented communities, in particular, I think the LGBTQ community. Anything to add on this question?
Yeah, I was thinking as a follow-up to Dr. Khosravi as well, so many young people are experiencing symptoms that the data shows from onset of symptoms to first treatment, the average duration is 11 years, right? So if you even get to a point where you're willing to accept services and support, especially for marginalized communities, I think it's so important that they feel comfortable. Guys, I've taken my son to a counselor before, and it wasn't a comfortable environment. Sometimes putting a kid in a 10 by 10 room to talk to somebody on a couch doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why we're so excited about this nature-based facility where we can do counseling on a walking path, walking through the trees. So I do think, Susanna, that it's important that parents look for providers where their kids feel comfortable. We definitely, we're working with marginalized communities. It's in our roots as an agency and being, mission-based and purpose-driven. And so many kids in the LGBTQ community experience significant issues. And YSS has been fortunate over the years to be able to recruit employees from the LGBTQ community who then in turn hopefully make the kids, questioning different things, experiencing different things, feel comfortable in that environment. I'll say from a cultural standpoint, we're more racially diverse than our communities, but we're not nearly as racially diverse as the clients that we're serving. And so I think it's important as leaders of organizations to continually think about how can we recruit not just staff, but also board members that look like the kids and the clients that we're serving. And then I would say, like Renee does, you see her championing the cause. I sit on the state's Juvenile Justice Advisory Council, and the there's a disproportionate minority contact committee, because Iowa is one of the most disparate states in the country as it relates to the likelihood that you're going to be arrested as a kid if you're Black than if you're white. And many of the services that have been designed, the evidence-based services that we're providing, have been designed for white boys. So not only do we have a DMC committee, we also have a gender task force thinking about how do we ensure that the services that we're providing as a community are focused on the end user and their unique individual circumstances. I did reach out to a board member who's an expert in DEI, Ross Wilburn. He said, you know what, Andrew, Luther College, so right here, Iowa based, you can just Google Luther College marginalized, and it will take you right to a page full of resources, lots of different resources, probably targeted towards college kids. But I looked at it recently, and they're all really, really good, and Iowa based, most of them.
That's fascinating. Well, for the sake of time, Doug, this one wasn't quite your area, so I think I will just move to resources, but thank you for those fantastic answers. So one of the things that we heard early on when we created Lifting the Veil was, where do we turn? Where do we go? And so our guest experts have provided us with a number of resources that we feel could be useful. This is added on to lists that we created. So here is a shot. Don't worry, when we send you a follow-up, we will also send these resources to you. But no, I think just from this list, as a parent or somebody who cares about teens, while we could use a lot more and we need more treatment options, there are places that you can go for help, and there's places that you can take your kids if they need help. So thank you to our panelists for contributing to those resources. So I'm going to give our experts just a minute to think about some parting wisdom. I think we'll have a chance for about a 1-minute wrap from them. And while they are thinking about how to send us off, a couple of things that I would like to make you aware of. So first of all, I would love to invite you to subscribe to our stunning publications from DSM Magazine and IA Magazine. When you are a subscriber, you get the print magazines, you also get our digital newsletters, and then you get special publications like our Lifting the Veil magazine, Inclusion magazine, and invitations to events like these. Of course, we'd love for you to sign up for our free newsletters, DSM Weekly, DSM Weekend, and DSM Wealth, and our latest offering, it's now a year old, IA statewide newsletter that tells you things that are going on all across Iowa. So in terms of the Lifting the Veil magazine, if you have not seen the latest copy, which is from last year, as I mentioned, you can go to this website or you can call 515-288-4582. But we will be having a new magazine coming up soon in November that will be unveiled at our November event. So that brings me to our upcoming series. We would love to invite you to attend the next of these series. And the next one is going to be Supporting Young Children. That's on October 21st. So if you felt this was valuable, if you have teens, if you've got younger age children, we'll have experts who will talk to that younger age group. Please spread the word, because I think this is really valuable information. And then our last series in the program is called Caring for Those Who Care for Our Kids, around this whole theme. And so we'll have folks from education, from the medical community, from the counseling profession. But obviously this year, as you can see from the folks here who have been on the front lines, it's been a time working with kids through the pandemic, on top of a profession that already is stressful and difficult. So it'll be really interesting to hear about that. And we will unveil the new magazine at that November 18th date. So please mark the calendar and you'll get plenty of reminders from us. So let's turn back to our experts. And actually, you can have more than a minute if you would like, but we're interested in kind of what your send-off advice is after hearing everything today, hearing from your fellow panelists. What's your kind of summary advice? And Andrew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Susanna, about the prevalence of mental health issues across our community. And while we've got great campaigns like Make It Okay, while the Business Record, DSM Magazine, many other entities are looking to have conversations like this and address stigma, too many families are suffering in silence. Too many people aren't willing to acknowledge outside of their own home that they too are experiencing issues with their kids or themselves. And so I think that as a community, we all have an obligation to start sharing our stories publicly in a way that does make it okay. The campaign slogan is right. I also would encourage folks, if I've got more than a minute, to consider a career in a helping profession. We have more than 80 open positions at YSS right now, and we're desperate for people who want to help other people. And there's lots of opportunity now. So, my closing thoughts or remarks are, we've talked about the prevalence. It's 1 in 2 over a lifetime will have a mental health need. 1 in 6 will have a substance use disorder. It's important that people know that they're not alone. And Barry Griswold had written a book called The Adversity Paradox, where the things that seemed like the very worst thing that could be happening in someone's life, the turmoil that I pulled my family through, and the fact that I was experiencing substance use disorder and delinquency, ended up becoming the very best thing that could have happened in my life, foundational for the person that I have become and the opportunity that I have now to work for the agency that essentially saved my life. So my closing words are encouragement for families that are suffering, that treatment works and recovery is possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Doug, let's go to you next.
Yeah, I feel like the world we're in right now, I mean, it's so easy to get, just beaten down from whether it would be social media things, just the news, all the things, just all the negativity that's out in the world. And so I feel like we've got to equip ourselves the best we can to try to combat that and to try to have some positivity in our life. So I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the timeliness is pretty good here, I feel like. And it was basically, none of us would choose a negative thought, but I mean, we have negative thoughts all the time. So we don't have any control over our thoughts. So the challenge is, are we going to listen to those thoughts, or are we going to instead change and talk to ourselves? So what can we do to talk to ourselves when those negative thoughts come in? I know it's not a Band-Aid to fix everything, but it's just one little thing that maybe we can do a better job of. That when you think that I'm not pretty, or I'm too big, or I'm not, I'm not the right me, those thoughts are going to come in, and a lot of times they're driven from that external. And what can we do to then talk to ourselves instead? Which is, what, I'm created exactly how I'm supposed to be. I'm the person I'm, I've got a lot of great qualities, and here they are, blah, blah, so what can we do to talk to ourselves instead of listen to ourselves?
I love it. That's great advice for anybody, teen or not. And Dr. Khosravi, let's hear from you. Parting thoughts.
And I'm reading some comments, and Andrew is definitely an inspiration to a lot of us. So I definitely want to commend him on that, and tremendous story, and his advocacy and leadership and champion manner for us is amazing. Today, we obviously covered a lot of important topics and challenges presented to our children. While it's easy to look at it in a negative manner, I think it's also really important to reframe that our children are actually very capable and show a lot of resiliency. And during this time, especially the adolescent years, they're also going through a lot of brain development and frontal lobe development. So that's going to be significant with help with these challenges that are presented to them. And honestly, as a psychiatrist, primarily working on an inpatient unit, I'm meeting the most resilient kids on the unit sometimes. who are often under the most massive of challenging circumstances. And a lot of times they inspire me with their strength and courage. The other quick thing I want to make sure I emphasize today is to look beyond the behaviors, to look beyond kids who are quickly labeled as delinquents or budding sociopaths and quickly get stigmatized. It's so important for us to have the ability and opportunity to reach out to these kids and to really understand their struggles. Most often underneath those angry layers is a kid who's suffering from trauma or life circumstances with a core that really needs to be nurtured and not punished. And by communicating and talking and reaching out, we're also obviously challenging the stigma of mental health.
Beautiful words to leave us with. I really, really appreciate all of your comments. I want to thank our sponsors one more time for making this possible. Our supporting sponsor, Delta Dental, and our supporting sponsor, Clive Behavioral Health, which is a division of Mercy One. Our sustaining sponsor, Employee and Family Resources, IMT Insurance, and thank you to NCMEC for the mental health moment. More than anything, thanks to all of you who joined us today for caring so much about mental health and for working to lift the veil. We hope to see you at our next program in this series, as I mentioned, on October 23rd, called Supporting Our Young Children. We'll have some equally fantastic panelists who will be talking to us about youth. But we thank you for taking the time. Thank you again, Dr. Khosravi, Doug, Andrew. You've been terrific. I hope this leaves you all with some hope and inspiration. So thank you for joining us. And this concludes our program.